Good day, everybody. It is my privilege to present myself and Brian Harmelink for this paper on multimodality and Bible translation. I'm Sebastian Floor of the C Company and also working with the E10 Innovation Lab for Quality Assurance. I hand over to Brian for the first section of this presentation.
Yes, I'm Brian Harmelink and work with the Wycliffe Global Alliance, and I'm also part of the E10 Innovations Lab on Quality Assurance. And so it's our pleasure to present together this paper on multimodality and Bible translation. A quick overview of what we'll be talking about. This E10 Innovation Lab on Quality Assurance has had a kind of mandate, or what has been guiding our discussions. We'll talk a bit about that, and also we've been making 3 recommendations that we're working on. The first one that I'll be talking about is multimodality and multimedia. Then Sebastian will talk about broadening church involvement and new quality assurance processes and qualities in multimodality, and then a bit about some experimentation in pilot projects. So our purpose in this paper is to contribute to the global conversation of Bible translation quality by hopefully demystifying some of the concepts and ideas that we've been talking about in the Innovations Lab on quality assurance. And so we've recognized that many of the remaining needs in Bible translation are in smaller language communities without literary traditions. We've also been talking about how consulting resources can be leveraged in a different way for the many new projects that will take place over the next period of time. And also, how can the church play a more active role in quality assurance? So the 3 recommendations that we've been working on, the first one is my focus here, that we want to recommend that a multimodal, multimedial approach to both translation process and product be used. Well, you might be wondering, well, what does multimodality or what does multimodal translation mean? And when we talk about multimodal translation, we're talking about the several modes of communication, like speaking, writing, signing, seeing, hearing, reading, and touching. These are all different modes of communication that involve all of our senses and our perceptions. And our recommendation is that all of these be included in the translation process. In fact, many of these modes have been included, but we want to recommend that they be considered as part of the translation process. And then these will be expressed in different media. So this is a difference between the multimodality refers to the modes of communication, and multimedia to the media through which the translation is made available for the community. For example, printed books or recordings, still and moving pictures, videos with sign language. And we live in an age where these kinds of multimedia products are so possible and available. So this is our recommendation, to think of how to bring the multimodalities of communication into the process of translation, and then consider multimedial approaches to making scripture available for engagement in the community. And I'd like to illustrate this with an example of John 11:35, that very short verse in John's Gospel, and that sometimes can present an exegetical question of, well, how do we in the language of the translation express in a proper way the type of weeping or crying or mourning that Jesus experienced at this point. And so I'd like to just discuss briefly how I would, as a facilitator, guide a kind of process that would take into account these multimodalities of communication, because we want this process to be experiential, where the translators and perhaps a facilitator or others involved in the translation process, as well as people from the church and community, would come together to go through conversational processes of developing a holistic understanding of what this part of Scripture is talking about. And so I would begin by talking about friendship. Lazarus was one of Jesus' friends. And also this, we need to recognize the significant relationship of Jesus and Lazarus' sisters. So this is a very good friend of Jesus who has died. And I would hope then that people in the gathering would begin to share experiences about family members who have died, or good friends, people in their communities who have died, and how they express their grief and their mourning. Recently, I've had a very good friend who's died, and so this is an experience that is close to all of us as humans. And we want, through this kind of process, to allow this more experiential, multimodal way of discovering the meaning of this part of Scripture, to bring us to the point where, to talk about it in this way, John 11:35 would then be expressed by the people in that community in an authentic way that reflects their way of weeping and mourning and grieving in this experience of the death of a close friend. And so when we consider this idea of multimodality and multimedia, it's important to recognize that multimodality has always been there. It's always been a part of human communication. It's not some new theoretical concept. Communication has always been multimodal, recognizing the richness and power of human communication, so that multimodal translation seeks to have both the processes and the products consistent with this richness and power of human communication, and in a sense, broadening the bandwidth of the ways that we have been thinking about translation and communication, and then the reception of different kinds of products in the community where the translation is being done. So over to you now, Sebastian. I'll stop sharing.
Good. I will share my screen. I'll be talking about the second two recommendations. So we're talking about broadening church involvement. And the third one will be a new quality assurance processes and qualities, as well as in the light of multimodality. And then we'll speak about some pilot projects briefly. So the second recommendation is an expanded role for the church in Bible translation, a broadened involvement in Bible translation at all levels. And there are some underlying assumptions. All of this, I refer you to the paper, which all these issues will be laid out more carefully, more extensively. First of all, the recognition of the dramatic growth of the church in the global South and East. Increase in numbers, but also increase in quality. more educated leaders, deeper spiritualities, theologies all over the world. And so that's definitely the one. A second recognition is the missiological appropriateness of a wider church role in Bible translation. The church, the scriptures have been given to the church for the edification of the church and for the expansion of the kingdom. So it is appropriate for the church to have a bigger role in its authentication processes, the quality assurance processes, and so on. The third recognition is the importance of scripture engagement, an issue close to our hearts, to close the gap between scripture product and scripture experience. You know, we are not only working on a book, on just only a translation, and then hoping that by itself, people will experience it, people will use it, people will engage with it. But is there a way that maybe scripture translation and scripture engagement can be brought together? And so that is what's underlying this assumption. And then, of course, lastly, the recognition of the importance of local knowledge. A lot of the Bible translation movement currently is dependent in a certain sense on expertise. Where does this expertise come from? We all agree that there is local knowledge available, and there are educated people available. It's increasingly the case. Levels of education in the world is rising, and higher education as well. But not only that, even at local level, even people who can't even read and write have access to or have sophisticated knowledge about their world, about their language, about their culture. So definitely an important assumption. So we suggest a different set or a revised set of Bible translation agents, Bible translation role players, and that they all will play a role in the quality assurance. The first one we want to suggest is the scripture authentication elder. It's a person in the culture that is probably a senior church leader, maybe the most senior church leader, maybe with some theological training. It depends where in the world, but where we are doing the experiments right now in Papua New Guinea, we're talking about people probably with 12th grade, maybe a catechist, maybe 2 years of theological training, something like that. Then we talk about the exegetical coach, somebody who can work with the scripture authentication elder, normally a person from the community, doesn't have to be, but somebody who obviously knows the language well and who knows the Bible well, to the degree that they, what is available there. And then a larger group of translators, especially for oral projects. We have seen that in the oral Bible translation movement. Larger groups, often two groups that peer review one another's work, definitely a way forward. And then also a larger group of reviewers, 20 or more people. And then lastly, another innovation is a scripture review board. So, for example, in a certain province, there are several languages that have been translated, but then there's provincial pastors, maybe higher level pastors at national level or provincial level, regional level, and some of them might even speak some of those languages. They definitely will be knowing the culture of those regions, and then the scripture authentication elder will then present drafts to these boards, maybe in a multi-project checking sessions, where several of them are together, and they will be going through different checklists. So we're also thinking of a different process of doing translation. It's not that it's not being done. There are places in the world where this has been done. But for example, a weekly cycle or something equivalent. But before translation starts a very serious and intentional preparation phase, readiness, to get readiness. It's a time to talk about a translation mandate, a translation brief for that project. What do we want to do? The selection of the right variant, who will be involved, maybe initial training can be provided there. This process might take a while, but a very important one, a very upfront initial. And then when translation starts, there's first of all the familiarization and internalization can be handled by the exegetical coach, the authentication elder, maybe the first day of the week. And then the second day they move on, they work with the translators and they start drafting. Normally an oral process we recommend, review and revision taking place. And then moving on to further review and revision. You will see the repetition of review and revision within the church and community. First of all, a peer review, maybe a parallel group of translators will then look at what the one group has done and vice versa, cross-checking one another. Then there's the revision within the community by reviewers, by a larger group of reviewers who also receive the very same training that everybody else has received, which I will touch on later. And that will go on then maybe at the end of the week. There's something available that can be made available on devices or in other ways to the church, maybe a youth group, maybe a ladies group, maybe on Sunday morning in the sermon, the story can be acted out and performed that they have translated that week. You can read more about that in the paper. It's all been explained before it all goes to the to the scripture authentication elder. He will give it one final look before he takes it to the regional scripture review board, and of course then publication, but there again ongoing evaluation and revision. So by having it church-based, we are not only talking about external expertise. Yes, there will be regional expertise, but we're also especially thinking of local expertise. There are local experts of the language, the master storytellers, the people who know the culture profoundly. Are they involved? By broadening this involvement in a multimodal way, by orally, by written, whatever other way there is, but to have this process to really mine what is there in terms of local knowledge to bring to the translation. Yes, there's expertise necessary on the meaning of scripture, of the exegesis. We're talking about that, but later, that has also been thought of. But definitely a focus on the local knowledge, a renewed focus on spreading the net wider to get the local knowledge into the project. Key roles of the local scripture authentication elder, people like that, and the scripture review board, the role that they will play. Ongoing training, that is the whole was underlying it. Every 3 months, every 6 months, courses and training that can be provided to upgrade their knowledge, their ability. And the use of checklists, well designed, easy to use, but sophisticated enough checklists that it can really contribute to the quality of a translation. And then iterative checking and authentication. That is the name of the game. Ongoing checking, rechecking, while making steady progress. So that is the second recommendation. The third one is then different quality assurance tools and processes. Here, first of all, just another look at the understanding of translation qualities. What is quality? What are we measuring? I think there's an agreement, increasing agreement that quality is complex. It depends on a variety of factors. It depends what you are measuring. Do you only measure the written text, the final written text? or do you also measure the appropriateness of the translation, or the acceptability of the translation, the trustworthiness of the translation, the context, the process it has been arrived at, and so on and so on. And what Brian mentioned, for example, the example on from John 11, what is the process? How is meaning being discovered? So we're talking about comprehensive quality. But quality is much more than just a text that is written according to a certain standard, but there's a whole process that is also being measured. So instead of the well-known qualities of accuracy, clarity, and naturalness, you can read all about it in the paper. I'm not going to go into any depth here. Those qualities were originally written more than 50 years ago for written translation. But as we move to more multimodal translation, oral, performance, where stories are being, storytelling, oral storytelling, things like that. We probably need to expand the notions of quality, how we measure quality, and we were thinking, we suggest the following for a trustworthy or trusted translation. A translation needs to be true to the meaning, faithful translations, but also trusted people and processes. And you'll notice this is a social process. Also appropriate. What makes a translation appropriate? Is it fit for purpose? Is it acceptable to the people? Is it in the right variant? Is it in the right register, the right translation type? If people want a more formal translation, or if they want a more dynamic translation, or a mixture, or what even if they want both? All of those issues, medium, what medium should the scriptures come to them? And we are suggesting both oral and written. A multimedia approach to scripture publication. And then, of course, the translation needs to be understandable. Not only clear, not necessarily clear at first reading. We all know that is very hard for an individual at very first reading, for the first time to read, to understand the gospel of say the epistle of James, for instance, or the epistle of Hebrews. That is a tall order. But often meaning and understanding is processed communally, multimodally, with multimedia. And maybe it takes time for a group to really dig into, to really understand Romans. It might take a significant time. But is the translation such that it's retrievable? The translation is not a mistranslation in such a way that the meaning is obscured and or only a part of the meaning is given, and that will skew this whole process of a community to really understand. And then lastly, a translation needs to be appealing, beautiful, artistic. The master storytellers, are they involved? If they have given input? The high quality authors, the literary artists, the verbal artists, for quality translation. So, and then we have developed checklists. You can see about that in the paper as well, based on those 4 translation qualities. And at all levels, these checklists, they're designed to be used at all levels by the exegetical coach, by the translators, by the reviewers, authentication elders, that all will have similar sets of these checklists that they can go through to measure their translation. And those will be typically contain the questions consultants will ask, and they are being worked in there. So then, for this approach, of course, we will need 2 things. We will need a new curriculum that is incorporating multimodal approaches, the oral, the visual, pictures, video, text, and then these approaches, these multimedia exegetical resources, then are used in training at all levels of the translation process. And then under, very important part, last part of recommendation 3 is the iterative training during the lifespan of a project. You can read about that in the paper. And also the, progressive publication even, not thinking of a final Bible to be published and then never again to be looked at, but constant, but to have mechanisms in place for books and for testaments, and for sections, groups of portions to be progressively published, and like a growing Bible idea, until the full Bible is translated, and then again, not stop there. Maybe it's again necessary to go back to the beginning and do revisions, but just recommending a progressive publication concept. All these ideas are being experimented right now. One in Papua New Guinea, we have with global partnerships. We have an initiative in 2 provinces, Madang and Milne Bay, with a range of languages where these methods are being tested and piloted. Initial feedback is very positive, especially the familiarization and internalization process has been very, very helpful. All of that is multimodal, oral, and then from oral to print. The same we are doing in the Psalms at Sing initiative, where it's a multi-agency 6 Psalms pilots in Southern and Central Africa, where these same ideas are being tested, with very positive results to start with. This is all from us, so thank you.